Why parents always worshipped my golden child brother and treated me like a failure for choosing to start a business instead of following their path. They even went so far as to disown me. But now that my company is wildly successful and my brother has lost his job, they've suddenly had a change of heart and are begging me to hire him like nothing ever happened at a 29-year-old man. I recently received a message from my parents, who I haven't spoken to in 5 years. They reached out seeking assistance, more specifically, for my 31-year-old brother, Craig. Craig was always considered the favorite child. My parents openly favored him, especially in academics, constantly reminding me how much better he was doing and urging me to catch up. He went on to attend a prestigious college, and 5 years ago, he became the youngest vice president in his company's history. He had been working there since graduation, earning a substantial income from the start. His high-flying corporate position became the benchmark my parents relentlessly held over me. Truthfully, I had no desire for a standard 9-to-5 job. While I acknowledged the benefits of such a path, my ambition was to be an entrepreneur, a goal I've held since I first understood the term. 5 years ago, after gaining experience in my chosen industry, I decided it was time to launch my own venture, a line of modern, edgy car accessories I designed myself. I had thoroughly researched and developed a solid business plan, believing my parents would support my aspirations. Despite their clear favoritism towards Craig, I decided to discuss my plans with them. This was 2 days after they threw a party celebrating Craig's promotion. When I presented my idea, instead of offering feedback, they simply laughed, suggesting I was playing a prank. They found it embarrassing that after years of education, this was my grand vision for the future. I assured them I was serious, but they advised me against quitting my job, stating they'd be ashamed to introduce their son as a failure. They were convinced my business was doomed from the start due to my supposed inadequacy, and in contrast to my brother's success, they didn't want me to fail so spectacularly. Feeling deeply offended, I argued, declaring I would pursue my business with or without their backing. They responded that I was free to do as I pleased, but not free from the consequences. They warned that if I proceeded, they'd be forced to cut me out of their lives, as I would be an embarrassment. They were tired of introducing one son as a corporate vice president and the other, at 25, still figuring things out. They stated this conversation had been brewing for a while. Their ultimatum was clear: either continue working my way up in my current job and avoid disgracing them, or pursue my entrepreneurial dream and lose them. My choice was evident. I cut them out of my life and haven't spoken to them since. My brother, naturally, sided with them, which was fine by me. His arrogance had always kept me from wanting a close relationship. My business idea stemmed from my long-standing involvement with cars, and I had immense faith in it. I knew there was a demand, so I took a leap of faith to prove my parents wrong. I left my job and dedicated myself to my goal. It was a risky move, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone, but it paid off. Within months, I secured investors and launched my company. The beginning was tough. I lived paycheck to paycheck, relying solely on word-of-mouth marketing to attract customers. Slowly, more clients came on board. After about a year and a half, things rapidly accelerated, and I haven't looked back. Today, I'm quite comfortable. I have a pleasant apartment in a great neighborhood, a nice car, and everything I initially dreamed of. I wouldn't call myself a millionaire, but I'm doing very well, certainly not the failure my parents anticipated. I'm genuinely happy to have disproved them, so much so that I don't even feel the need to rub it in their faces. It's simply not worth it. For the past 5 years, I've maintained no contact. I married my girlfriend of 8 years 2 years ago, and last month, we found out she's pregnant. Despite these significant milestones, I never reached out to my parents. They know how to find me. They could easily contact any relative for my address. I know they've been kept informed of my life through other family members who tell me my parents frequently ask about me but never initiate contact. I suppose that's their way of coping. Last week, however, they finally reached out, asking if I'd be willing to meet. I discussed it with my wife, and she encouraged me to go and see what it was about. Their message offered no details, so I arrived at their house unsure what to expect. They greeted me warmly, but I sensed an underlying tension. Even when I lived with them, they had never been so outwardly pleasant, so I knew their small talk was leading up to something. Finally, they addressed the real reason for my visit. They had heard about my business's success and wanted to congratulate me. There was no apology, but they expressed gladness that I had proven them wrong and that their initial skepticism had vanished. It was a pleasant surprise, and I simply smiled, unsure how to respond. Then they transitioned to Craig, explaining. He'd had a tough few months. His company wasn't doing well, resulting in mass layoffs, even among upper management, including him. For the past 4 months, he'd been home with nothing to do. My parents said he was struggling to find new work after being with the same company for so long and was quite depressed. I found it confusing why they were sharing this with me, as there was little I could do, so I let them continue, curious where the conversation was heading. Eventually, they got to the point, asking if I would consider hiring my brother. They explained he was too depressed to apply for jobs himself, and the offers he was receiving were below his previous pay grade. They wanted me to offer him a well-paying position in my company where he could utilize his expertise. I was speechless. I told them I needed time to consider it and would let them know my answer later. I intentionally didn't say yes, unsure how to react. I should have known they wouldn't contact me without a hidden agenda, given their past behavior. They seemed pleased, likely expecting a yes. Upon returning home, I thought about it and discussed it with my wife. We decided to decline. My wife, who works in banking and isn't involved in my company, emphasized that my business was my professional domain and my decision should stand. She didn't want to interfere if I believed working with my brother wouldn't be productive. Furthermore, she felt my parents' attempt at reconciliation wasn't genuine, so I wasn't obligated to fulfill their request. I hadn't even agreed to help him. I initially planned not to inform them, knowing a no would inevitably make me the villain. I tried to avoid confrontation, but they started texting daily, demanding an answer. I ignored these messages, but 2 days ago, they finally called, insisting I provide a response. I told them I had given it considerable thought and concluded I couldn't work well with Craig. I didn't want him in my company. Our relationship had never been good, so I didn't feel obligated to him or them to offer him a job. They completely erupted. They screamed at me about all they had done for me, raising me, paying for my childhood needs, and now, when they expected a favor in return, I was abandoning them, pretending I owed them nothing. I found this incredibly unfair. They did those things because I was dependent on them, and it would have been practically illegal not to. Besides, that wasn't the issue. I tried to explain that my inability to work with Craig was the sole reason. I didn't want him in my company, and there was no need for their screaming or dramatic behavior. Furthermore, we hadn't spoken in 5 years, ever since they expressed zero faith in me and refused to invest in my business. They had no right to push me around. They continued to yell, claiming they only contacted me because 5 years had passed, and they assumed I would have moved on, now that I was doing well. Instead, they accused me of being petty, holding grudges, and refusing to help my own family. They reminded me that Craig was my brother, and now that he was in trouble, I needed to be there for him. They even claimed he would have done the same for me if our positions were reversed. They insisted they would have supported me if my business failed, and therefore, I owed them the same. The argument grew incredibly heated and confusing. After a while, I told them I no longer wanted to speak and hung up, blocking their numbers. Since then, I've been really confused by my feelings, particularly by their claims that they would have helped me if I were in Craig's situation. My wife says they only said those things because I wasn't in that position and they were trying to manipulate me. She advises me not to fall for it, as they haven't even apologized yet and still expect my help. My brother was never kind to me when we were kids, and everyone constantly picked on me. I know she's right, but I still have this lingering feeling of guilt, and I just feel strange about everything. Update 1. Thank you so much for your responses. It's been a while since I spoke to my parents last, and honestly, what I did isn't that big of a deal. It's not like my brother will never get a job again. I just personally don't want to work with him. As I mentioned, my wife and I discussed it and decided to stick to our decision. However, my parents aren't happy with this. They've been going around making it sound like I'm jealous of my brother and always have been, which is why I'm supposedly relishing this opportunity to hurt my family. I don't even understand why they're taking this so hard. They've been texting every single relative we have about this. It's not like these relatives are talking to them, and they're just bringing it up. They're literally going out of their way to text them and tell them about me. Their behavior is ridiculous, and I think it's a plea for attention, but I'm not going to give it to them. They're blocked, and no matter what they do, I'm not unblocking them or discussing this further. Some relatives who bothered to reach out and send me screenshots received my full explanation of the situation. It's not like they were unaware, as my parents and I have run into each other at family events for the past 5 years without speaking. So most people knew about our strained relationship. But this is taking things too far, trying to directly involve them and make me look like the bad guy. After I clarified things with some relatives, most told me not to worry about my parents. They aren't going to turn against me since they're aware of what happened in the past and know my parents are just overreacting. So, I'm feeling good about that. Honestly, my wife is pregnant, so I don't have time to worry about these things right now. I've been thinking about making the announcement in a couple of weeks, but I think I'll do it earlier just so my parents can get the hint and stop bothering me. I think it's a good idea, though we're not sure if it'll work, since my parents are pretty heartless and might even try to trouble us despite knowing about the pregnancy. I wouldn't put it past them. Update 2. Hello. My wife and I made the pregnancy announcement on social media a couple of days ago. It's been about 10 days since my last conversation with my parents. Most of my family reached out to congratulate me, but then I received an email from an unknown sender stating that my child would suffer because of what I was doing to my family. I immediately knew this was from my parents. No one else would dream of saying something so horrendous. My baby isn't even born yet, and they're already wishing ill upon us just because I refused to help my brother. It's not even like Craig directly approached me for help. In that case, I would have at least considered it. But it's my parents who want me to give him a job. Anyway, that's beside the point. Even if I had done truly evil things, I don't think it would give them license to say such things. I didn't tell my wife about that email because it would only upset her, and I don't want that. She's in the very early stages of her pregnancy, but it's still very disappointing to read things like this. I chose to deal with this on my own and went over to my parents' house to speak to them in person. I didn't want to unblock them, so visiting them was the only way to communicate. However, they refused to even open the door, probably because they knew what they had done was truly wrong. So I spoke to them from outside their house, and I really lost my temper. I yelled at them, saying they had no right to say such things, especially after how they had behaved with me my entire childhood and how they had treated me for the past 5 years. It was as if I wasn't even part of the family. Now that I was moderately successful, they wanted a piece of it and wanted to share my success with my brother, even though they had never forced Craig to do such things when I was struggling. To be honest, they hadn't even been there for me when I was struggling, so they didn't deserve to even speak to me at this point. I told them that whatever they were trying to do wasn't working because it was just alienating me from them even more. I also said that I never wanted to speak to them again, and even if they apologized, I wasn't going to forgive them in the future. So they could say goodbye to any help from me when they retired, and they would never get to see their grandchild either. After saying that, I left and came back home, and to be honest, I feel really relieved now. I had been holding these things back for quite some time, ever since they started bothering me, but now it was high time I gave them a fitting response. I haven't told my wife about this interaction yet because I don't want to upset her, and I don't think I will until the pregnancy is done. Update 3. Hi. After I spoke to my parents last week in person, they decided to lay low for a while and do nothing. I also hosted a pregnancy announcement party at my house for some family members and close friends, and I had expected them to do something that day, but they didn't bother. So I thought maybe they had finally moved on from this whole episode, and I was trying to do the same thing. But then, this morning, I received a call from Craig while I was at work. That was really strange because he had completely stopped speaking to us 5 years back, and I had no idea what he wanted to speak to me about. For a second, I thought he might try to talk to me along the same lines as my parents and demand that I give him a job, and I would have to go through the entire ordeal again. So I ignored his first call, but then he called me a few more times and even messaged me saying that it was urgent and he needed to speak to me. He told me that I didn't need to worry because he wasn't going to ask anything of me. He said that he just wanted to discuss something that had been bothering him for some time. So I decided to answer the call, and we spoke today. He said that he had been pretty depressed for the past few weeks, so he hadn't been speaking to anybody, and had been ignoring all the messages and emails he had been receiving, including the ones from his relatives. It was only a couple of days ago that he had finally checked those messages and realized that everybody was talking about how it was unfair for our parents to be demanding that I give him a job in my company, especially when they had never treated me well. Craig was really confused because he had been talking to our parents constantly for the past couple of weeks, but they had not said anything about such things going on in the family. He had spoken to our parents after he read those messages and asked them if they had done something of the sort, and they had outright declined it and said that they didn't know what was being referred to in those messages. But he felt like they were lying to him, so he had called me instead to find out the truth. He had confided in our parents about his job situation and how upset he was, and he had never even once said that he wanted my help, so he couldn't understand why they had chosen to enlist me and then try to force me to contact him and give him a job when he himself had not asked for it. So, after giving it some thought, I decided to tell him the truth because I thought that he deserved to know exactly what our parents had been up to behind his back. I told him the entire story of whatever my parents had told me and said that, after they had shared his story with me, they had told me that I needed to give him a job and help my family out because he was not in a good place right now and they did not want him to suffer. I told him that maybe their initial intention was to genuinely help him and support him to get his life back on track, but eventually, it just turned into harassing me, and I was not fine with that. I told Craig that I was really sorry about his job because I knew that it meant everything to him, and he had put in a lot of work at the company in his position, and it could not have been easy to be laid off like that. But honestly, he also knew that we never got along and would not work well together, which is why I declined my parents' request. Craig seemed to understand. He told me that he was not interested in working with me. He didn't mean it offensively, but he was just not in the right state right now to be working with anybody, and he was just taking a break on purpose. My parents had made it out like he had no offers that were worth considering, but he actually did, and he was just holding out on them because he wanted to take a break, and that was his personal choice. It was not that he was not upset, but his decision to not work for a while was not influenced by that. He seemed pretty frustrated, so he vented to me for a bit, and I let him, because even though we were not on the best of terms anymore, I thought that he could do it. Anyway, after having a full conversation about this, he told me that he was very upset about what our parents had done regarding him because it made him seem desperate and it gave people the wrong idea about him, like he was trying to convince my parents to force me to get him a job, and it was just really confusing because he had not done anything of the sort. So he told me that he was going to speak to our parents about this, and he apologized to me for all that I had gone through. I thought it was really mature of him, and I really felt like he had grown up a lot in the past 5 years, especially after he got laid off from his job. I guess he got the idea that nothing was permanent, and so he should not be so proud and arrogant. Maybe that was a lesson in disguise. But anyway, we were not exactly able to patch things up, but at least we had a good talk, and I think that's enough for me. Update 4: a couple of days ago, Craig and I spoke on the phone. Following our discussion, he informed me he would confront our parents about their actions. He did so, and it didn't go well. My parents became defensive, claiming they were only trying to help him because they disagreed with his decision to take time off and believed he needed to resume his job search immediately. This led to a huge fight, with Craig accusing them of trying to control his life from the beginning and never allowing him to make his own decisions, even as an adult. My parents, predictably, didn't like that and began listing all the things they had done for him, which were simply normal parental responsibilities. I don't understand why they always feel it's appropriate to brag about these things as if they were doing us a favor. It wasn't a favor, they had to do it anyway. The argument escalated, and now Craig is no longer speaking to them. And guess who they're blaming for all of this? Yep, you guessed it, they're blaming me, once again. I just don't understand how I can become the scapegoat for literally every situation they're in. This time, there were no personal confrontations. They simply decided to make a Facebook post about it. Luckily for me, all our relatives immediately came to my rescue and called my parents out on their nonsense. They reminded them that they had been terrible parents, not just to me, but also to Craig in a way, because they kept trying to control him and put him under pressure, especially when he was going through such a difficult time. They should have been there for him morally and emotionally, but instead, they were trying to put him down even more and make him seem like the bad guy. After receiving many comments from our relatives, they decided to delete that post and block everyone from my family. To sum it up, pretty much everyone has ostracized them, and I'm really happy about it. Craig and I, well, he has apologized to me for treating me badly in the past, and we're going to try and build our relationship in the future. But right now, the most important thing in my life is my wife, and I'm really excited to be a father.